Hi, and welcome to Conquering the JavaScript Interview. I'm Luke, and today's algorithm is another beginner skill level 1, where we're going to be learning how to count the number of vowels in a given string. We're going to learn about a little bit of RegEx magic and another solution using a for loop that will look similar to previous ones in this playlist. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let's go ahead and dive on in. So, like I had mentioned, we need to write some kind of code, a function that takes a string as its argument, and it needs to count the number of vowels that appear in it. For example, the string value of critical role should return 5. That would be our I, A, O, and E. So A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, but we're not going to worry about that rule, are your vowels, in case you're a non-native English speaker and watching this video. But yeah, that's the point of it. It's pretty straightforward and it's a fun one to dive in. Like I said, I love these beginner ones because they just teach you these fundamental tools and get your brain thinking on how to tackle algorithms versus building full stack CRUD apps, which is what my other playlist series does. So to count the number of vowels, we have two choices. I'm going to take the slightly more complex approach here at first, and this is actually pretty easy if you have any kind of regular expression experience whatsoever. What we can actually do is, I think we can actually do it in one line, but I might break it into two just to make it legible. Remember, for all testing purposes, we always, when it comes to most of these algorithms, we always want to make sure that if it needs to return something, it returns something. We're not just going to be logging something into the console. I mean, we will for visualization purposes here, but we need to return it so this function can be tested and make sure its output is correct if we're dealing with something like HackerRank or leak code or like a whiteboard interview. I remember to have that. I think I mentioned that almost every video because it bit me in the rear once, and that's what happened. So we can actually take the input string, and we have a function called match that allows us to run a regular expression on this thing here, where we're going to be providing the following, right? No, not a comment. There we go. Yeah, so here's what we're running. I think that goes on the outside. GI out there. Yeah. So what we're going to be running here is this regular expression that's going to be matching case insensitive globally across the string, hence the G and the I, the following letters. We're going to say A, E, I, O, or U. And again, those are going to be our vowels. So basically, it's going to say, hey, any of these characters globally, case insensitive, match them. And that should return to us an array of how many characters in a string match this regular expression, which means if it returns an array, arrays have a .length property that allows us to test this one line function here. I'm also going to console log above, again, for our sake, what this should be doing for us in the event it's working correctly. So again, if you have experience in regular expressions, it's a no-brainer, one-liner, cool to throw out in an interview process and be like, yeah, I know, like, sometimes regular expressions are difficult to work with, or a lot of people don't know how they work. So I'll show you a different, I will show you a second way I can also solve this using like more traditional code methods. So for example, a loop and a condition. So, this is one of those things where like I encourage y'all, like show off that if you're in an interview with actual people, show off that you have a couple different ways to tackle this and mention it's like, oh, like I know regular expressions aren't everyone a cup of tea, so I'll show you a more like programmatic way to solve it. But yeah, let's see if this sucker works, right? So we're gonna say count our vowels. We're gonna put in this input string right here of critical role, and we should see a 5 with any luck, and we do. That's awesome. That's what I'm talking about. So we're looking to see. But yeah, that's the regular expression version, and as a bonus, we're gonna solve this, like I said, a bit more programmatically, as we'll actually learn something from this process here. But this is good to know. I almost want to I almost want to take a course on regular expressions, or not a course, but I almost want to dive further into them so I can understand them better, because there's some pretty wonky and crazy ones out there. Anyway, right. So the other way we need to consider solving this is we need to loop through each letter of the given string, and we have to then increment some kind of count that we're keeping track of every time we approach or find a vowel, right? So we have to loop through a string. We've seen this in previous videos where we can do the following. We can call it letter or character or char, whatever, of the input string. And we're going to hit it with a 2 lowercase here. We want to make sure that we're not going to be bogged down by capital letters not counting the same way. And we'll see why here in just a moment. Right, so this is a technique in for of loops where we can just pick each character or letter individually of our string and begin looping through it. That's what this will give us here. And so clearly, if we need to be keeping track of some kind of count, I need to declare a variable outside of the loop itself to make sure it's not reinitialized by mistake every single time. And some condition has to be true that if this letter is a vowel of some kind, we need to increment that count. So we can even do some pseudocode if it helps. Is a vowel, then all we need to do from this point on is simply increment the count by 1. And then after the loop is done going through the entire string, we have to simply return the count back for testing purposes, and for visualizing for ourselves, we're going to go ahead and console log it here as well. So that's what we have to do here. Now, how can we tell if a letter is a vowel? Well, there is a handy method when it comes to arrays called the .includes. And includes is a method that will determines whether an array includes a certain element, returning true or false as appropriate. So it returns a true or false value for us, aka it can help us here in this condition. And based on the array values, includes is a function we have to call, and we're going to be passing it each letter that we are looping through in our input string. So we're calling this function and passing it in a value, the letter. And as long as it's included in this array, it should return true or false to us. As of right now, it's going to always be false because we have nothing in the array, but let's go ahead and assume that this is where we would plug in A, E, I, O, and U. Or Y sometimes. Again, have some fun if you're like an interview setting and you get this kind of a question. Talk about the Y edge case and how you would have to handle it, or maybe provide some kind of conditional that can be toggled saying, count vowels, and then pass in like a Boolean second optional argument that says if this is true, then Y is now considered a vowel, and you would have to just change your code from there. So you can take this and again, with all things, ratchet it up a notch or two to make it more of a intermediate style question by adding those kinds of niche cases, edge cases, scenarios, and things like that. So yeah, that is what we need to do here. Now technically this, I think every time this loop would go, would redeclare this array in memory or like reassign a position in memory for this, a reference in memory to this array. So again, if you wanted to talk about like better code, I would actually probably make an array outside of the function itself if your interviewers are allowing you to do that, and be like, well, in this case, if you want to add a Y in the future, you can always just add it to this global array, and then that way your whole application will be referencing the correct array of vowels for this application that we need. But this will be a bit better or a cleaner solution rather than just putting that array directly in the condition of inside of a for loop. Going to be read, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, that should be it. So we have our count. It starts at 0. It will only increment by 1 for every letter that is found or included in this array using the array includes method. We're going to console log it and return it to ourselves, and we should save this, let it rerun, and we get another lovely 5 right up there in the terminal above my fat head. So yeah, this one was pretty, as most of these beginner ones are, they're straightforward, but again, I love how they kind of get your mind thinking in this regard, and all these cool tools you end up learning, native methods you end up learning about strings and arrays and regular expressions, all that kind of fun stuff. Building up those fundamentals to hit those intermediate questions down the line in this playlist series. So yeah, hope y'all enjoyed this one, and get involved in our community. Check the description below for links to the playlist, previous video, and a lot of other kind of fun stuff about Covalence. So later, y'all.